welcome to the, what are we talking about? Dystopias, dystopian societies in Heinlein's worlds, which is to say, whatever the hell we feel like talking about. I'm Toni Weisskopf. I'm a publisher of Baen Books, and as there is no indicated moderator for this panel, I have taken over and I will be moderating. Yay! We will be taking questions and audience input, but first we want to hear from the panelists. So, how many people here have read everything that Heinlein has ever written? Yes, many. Okay. All right. How many people here have read a buttload of Heinlein? Yes, everyone? All right, okay. So I'm sure that all of you have opinions about Heinlein, because Heinlein is the kind of author about whom everyone has opinions. And we will be soliciting input from you guys, but as I say, first we're going to hear from our panelists. So we're going to start with self-introductions. On my far left, the lady in the hat.
Hey, I'm Elise Matheson, and I'm a Heinlein fan and have been one for a long time. In preparing for the panel, I thought, ooh, Farah Mendelsohn is doing a complete chronological reread of Heinlein. I'll do that too. And of course the thing happened that always happens when I start reading Heinlein. I fell into the stories and forgot to keep track of anything I was actually looking for. Nom books. So in my head, having just finished Beyond This Horizon, it is either 1948 or 1942, depending if you're talking about when it was released or when it was initially serialized.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Hi everybody, my name is Danny Price. I inherited a collection of books from my father that had all kinds of sci-fi in it, and Heinlein was amongst them, and I kind of tore through all of it very quickly. And of the set, the ones that stood out was things like Moon's Archmistress, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And oddly, so I've been told, I do like some of the later stuff, particularly The Cat Who Walked the Walls.
Yes. It's okay to like later Heinlein. We're not here to judge. This is a safe space. Yes. So, well, we're talking. How old were you when you first encountered Heinlein?
I would have been 7 or 8 at the time.
Okay. How about you?
I would have been I would have been probably about 18 or 19 and a senior in college.
Yeah. Do you remember what the first Heinlein novel was that you read?
You know, I'm pretty sure the first one I read was Stranger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, living about the right time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 1978.
Yeah, a little bit late,
So,
but yeah.
But there it was.
Yeah, there it was.
There it was, and there I was.
Yeah. It's a good novel for college.
Yeah, it kind of is. You can stay up real late talking about that one.
Absolutely. I read Dahlgren in college. Perfect time.
Yeah.
So.
Jeez, that one's still sitting on the nightstand. I still haven't finished it.
You might have to go back to college for Dahlgren. But we're not here to talk about Delaney. I am sure that I encountered Heinlein's short stories before I read a novel, because I too found Heinlein through my dad's science fiction collection. My dad is an astrophysicist, and he read a lot of classic science fiction, Asimov and Clarke and Andre Norton and Keith Laumer and Heinlein. But the first novel that I read at about age 12 or 13 was I Will Fear No Evil. So, and this is one of the reasons why we judge, not at this panel. And I kept reading Heinlein, so. I Will Fear No Evil is a great example, in fact, of a dystopian Heinlein society. But let us follow Farah's example and try to take things more in chronological order. I started my list with Beyond This Horizon, and you're ending at this point with Beyond This Horizon. So you want to talk about earlier dystopias and what Heinlein defined as a dystopia in his earlier years, because it's a theme that goes throughout his entire career.
Well, my telephone is goofing up my list of Heinlein books that I've been carrying around. There were a lot of short stories that I hadn't read for a long time, and a couple that I hadn't read at all. And in the very early stuff, I kept, well, okay, I gotta say something first about my relationship with Heinlein's work.
Yeah.
I haven't heard other people talk about this that much, but what I find in Heinlein, what it speaks to me about is the romance of business.
The romance of business. All right, I haven't heard that before either.
Yeah,
Tell us more.
I am a small business owner,
Yeah,
probably shaped partly by my reading.
interesting.
A lot of what I see in it is how easy is it for the person who's not from the best school, who doesn't have the in, who doesn't have all these connections, to either get listened to when they have something important to say scientifically, or politically, or economically. And I was just in a conversation with somebody downstairs who was talking about how the science in the early stories was, much of it, in addition to the obvious science, was economics.
Okay.
And they were making a case actually, and then later for Muna's Hirschmisters, for the science of economics being extremely important in the dystopia there. But I read through it and I see all of the stuff about, what's it like when you're trying to get by? What's it like when you are trying to have enough to sit under your own fig tree and not be afraid?
I mean, Time Enough for Love, there is a how-to to start up a restaurant business in the middle of Time Enough for Love.
Yes.
Also the biological argument for incest, but never mind that.
And then given the business stuff, there are various places that you could consider dystopic for business owners depending on who you were and where you were. The guy at the top probably not going to think it's a dystopia. What's the short story where they're working on Venus because of a bet? One bet that they weren't slaves on Venus, and the other said, oh, they are. Sign up and I'll show you. What was that?
I haven't reread them from the beginning, you tell me.
I can't, I'm going to have to look at the list.
Anybody out there remember which story that is? I am very disappointed.
Yeah.
All knowledge, all right, there we
Logic
go.
of Empire.
Logic of Empire, there we go.
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you. My faith in fandom is restored. So yeah, I mean, what Heinlein's just defined as a dystopia is sort of interesting to me, because most of the time Heinlein's stories are positive. He may set up dystopias, but the people who are acting in it are not part of them. I was talking with Lois Bugel this afternoon about this very topic, and she was saying it's something that Heinlein's characters react against. So Heinlein is not setting up a dystopia as the end point of his story. It's not he doesn't do if this goes on type stories, although I think he did do if this goes on. All right.
The dystopia is the thing that the heroes are struggling against.
Yeah. Talk more about that.
So, I mean, a lot of what Heinlein tries to do, or what I get out of it, is that there's very much like a higher ideal, a higher value that they're kind of striving towards. This sort of, like a lot of people have brought up the comparison that he kind of espouses almost like a libertarian viewpoint, or it could be read as such.
Heinlein is much like the Bible. You can get out of it what
Whatever
you put
you
into
want,
it. So, yes,
fair.
but certainly you can see a lot of libertarian points in much of Heinlein's work. We are not going to make broad statements about this.
Fair. I'll try to be careful with generalizations
That's
here.
all right.
But what interested me about it was this idea of different power structures and how they interact with one another. You mentioned the economics, and there's a lot of political structures of how you mentioned small business. These are all social structures that act as a power dynamic to kind of constrain the people within the world. That is the function of the dystopia. And all the characters are trying to change their worlds so that way it's less dystopic. It's the definition of a hero practically.
Yeah.
And it's different when you're fighting a system, because a dystopia is a system.
Right.
And you haven't got, we need to go to fight the knight standing on the bridge, defeated him, yay. No, we have a whole system of knights.
It's
We
not
got
the
to
dragon, it's the system.
And it's interesting because it's not so much a villain kind of situation. I mean, there are certainly bad actors in Heinlein. Again, I go back to Time Enough for Love, and I think about the covered wagon parts where there bad people will come and take your stuff and rape your women. You know, fairly clear these are bad people. You know, they're not part of the system. They're just bad actors, right? But many times, what our hero is reacting against is a bad system. So it's not a good guy versus bad guy kind of thing.
They got to do one in that same book, I believe. The protector of servants, wasn't it? The guy in charge of the slave market who he came along on a quick inspection trip that he did not expect to take of their ship when they were escaping. And Lazarus Long says, when asked what happened to him, he says, "I wondered if you'd noticed that. I spaced him."
So yeah, not a big believer in slavery, but yeah, I mean.
But that was both a person and a representative of the system.
Representative of the system, yeah. Trying to think what other kinds of dystopias did Heinlein talk about? We'll get input in just a bit. And it wasn't just economic systems too, but in Revolt in 2100, we have the revolt is against a theocracy. So he set up numerous ways that systems can go bad.
Yeah.
And in fact, the more I looked at this and started to make lists, the more I saw how many bad systems Heinlein had in his books, to the point where I wonder if there's a book where there wasn't a bad system set up. What do you think that?
I think if you're a member of the Howard families and there's a bad system, you can say, wait for a while, a good one will come along, and then it will disappear too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cyclical.
So part of it you think is just taking the long view, no pun intended.
As it were, yeah.
The long view, Lazarus Longhour. Taking a more historical view of.
It's possible because he's always talking about the long view when he's talking about population, genetics, and preserving life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not preserving an individual life, it's do you preserve the life of your community, the life of your society, the life of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, it always strikes me as kind of zen. He's like, yeah, this is crappy, time to leave the planet. Oh, this again, fine, we'll come back in a while. Oh, this is good for a while, let's do this. But he doesn't believe, I don't have the words for it, but there's a Zen Buddhist story about a monk who went around teaching an apprentice, and some people were really nice to the monk and some people were really mean to him, and the apprentice was getting all bent out of shape about this, and the monk said, look, whenever somebody's nice to you, tie a knot on the left side of your robe, and whenever somebody's mean to you, tie a knot on the right side of your robe, and he did that all day. And at the end of the day, the apprentice said, okay, I did that. And the monk said, does your robe still weigh the same as it did this morning?
Yeah, I like that. It's tricky. You don't count knots. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's clear that Heinlein does not believe in the perfectibility of humankind, right? Which I think a lot of, if this goes on, dystopias sort of are do, because they're saying if you don't do this, then things will get better. Heinlein is not saying that things are going to get better necessarily.
We'll find a new way to make it worse.
Right. but he does. But even so, he allows for hope for the individual. That the individual doesn't have to be part of the bad system that's set up. Does that make sense to you?
Because it is a system that is often the dystopia in his work. The individual is the motive force that can actually break out of the system, which is what happens at the end of some of them.
Yeah.
Or, sometimes go back in and try to change the system.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is that there's not many examples, I can't think of any examples of a case where the dystopia does not involve society somehow.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one that I came up with doing my prep for this was in Methuselah's Children, where Mary, what's her face? Mary,
Merlin.
thank you, Mary Sperling, is doesn't follow Lazarus, even though she loves him, and vice versa. But she chooses instead to become part of an alien overmind, and this is sort of the essential tragedy of Lazarus Long, is that this is what she chose instead of continuing on fighting the good fight with him.
Because it's one thing to lay down your individualism by laying down your life, but it's another thing to dissolve your individualism by giving it away.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's sort of the, again, a theme that we see repeated in other works as well.
I thought for humans that was one of the worst dystopias that he made, was the stop on that planet where, and the planet before, where, wasn't it, everything was nice and nobody had any ambition to do anything. It was all too nice.
Yeah, it was all too easy. And life has struggled again.
Comfort breeds complacency.
Yeah, and you saw it also in Starman Jones too, in a really neat way. With Starman Jones, we also have a stop on a planet, and the Starman Jones is working on this luxury liner, and the rich, fat, complacent, horrible people on the luxury liner, some of them came into their own on the planet when they had to struggle for survival, when they faced the adversity. And then they slowly slipped back into their same roles when they were rescued and continued on the voyage. And you see this all from the viewpoint of Starman Jones, who's a young man and who's not really appreciating all of this, but we as readers can see it happening. He could be very subtle when he was doing such things. He could also beat you over the head with stuff, which is fine. So let's see, we had Starman Jones, Methuselah's Children, I Will Fear No Evil.
I'm fond of that.
Yes, really?
Yeah, I am.
Ah, you and me, we are it.
How do you feel about Friday?
I haven't reread Friday, let's put it that way. I read it when it came out. I paid good high school money for that. I had no money to buy that sucker at hardcover. And I haven't felt the need to read it again. Do you see relationship between I Will Fear No Evil and Friday?
Friday has a special weird place for me because it was the first explicitly bisexual female character I had read.
Okay.
And that meant a lot.
Yeah.
I came out when I was 14, which was before I read Friday.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see some things wrestled with, and also her sense of not belonging with being an artificial person.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a culture that was not entirely the same as the culture I moved into when I left.
Okay.
And so I had a lot of trying to fake it, and, all that.
Yeah,
So yeah, I like the book for that. There were a bunch of other things I didn't like about that. Certain ways in which, I'm not sure there's a plot there that really goes. It didn't satisfy it, but there were things I loved about the book. So.
So the character not only spoke to you on a personal level, but felt real to you.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
And the way that she dealt with her alienation, was that something that rang true?
It intrigued me.
It intrigued you?
It intrigued me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the society that she was being alienated from?
What do you do when everyone looks at you and they think you're one thing, and you're not that? And they don't know you're not that. That's one of the things that really, really spoke to me. Anytime you're in the closet about anything, that has ringing true. The other one, the other reason that it spoke to me, and hi, coming out day. I'm genderqueer and haven't said much about it, but that spoke to me a lot. There, because that was something when I read it that I wasn't going to talk about for another 20 years.
Yeah.
But Friday, she wanted to have not just, she could have had a good life. She could have made a safe, closeted life, but that didn't work.
Right.
what do you do when you really want to be fully you? How do you find the place?
Right.
How do you find the people?
And in a society that's not going to let you.
Right. In a society where they're talking about, what was that thing about, the one group wants to shoot these people, the other group just wants to sterilize them.
Such a happy place, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. And in the end, it seems that her solution is the same as Lazarus Long's. You keep moving, you keep going, you keep finding your own place, you keep making your own society. And when that, as it inevitably will, goes bad, you keep going on.
But there's a tension between making it, and I really want to know what Danny thinks about that. There's this tension between making your own society and also opting out of ones that are just too goofed up to let you exist, or are inimical to you.
And I think you saw some of that in our Warfare No Evil. Yeah. So, Danny, thoughts?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about all this. You're throwing ideas at me and it's taking a second to form.
Welcome to the Token Heinlein panel.
No, it's interesting to me. I'm sorry, I lost the thought. We'll come back.
Okay, coming back. But yeah, but I think I Will Fear No Evil is particularly interesting, perhaps because it's not a particularly great novel. But the world building in the novel is interesting, and how the characters react to the world building in the novel. I personally feel like we're pretty much. I Will Fear No Evil could be a contemporary novel now. It would not be looked at as science fiction if you wrote it today. We have pretty much all of the stuff that Heinlein is talking about in I Will Fear No Evil right now.
Yeah.
But it is an overall very positive book. It is about making positive choices in a world gone crazy. No offense to people who love this world.
And also what it's like to build an alternative family structure in a place that doesn't entirely accept it, but sort of accepts it around the edges. And then when that family structure falls apart, there was the bit about Anita threatening, didn't Anita blackmail Friday to get her not to make a fuss? No, Anita claimed that Friday was going to blackmail them, and then Anita, okay, just all that.
Yeah. So for me, the interesting thing about Heinlein is again these individual choices, choosing to be positive in the face of all of these bad choices. And we can certainly talk about the creation of alternate families. It runs throughout much of it. Moon is a Harsh Mistress, in particular. Where we have line marriages, but where we have people who are choosing their families. And again, certainly something that we're seeing happening in the real world right now is the creation of these positive things out of chaos. So, all right, let's see. All right, what else do I have in mind? Chaos. Okay, the idea of chaos as its own kind of dystopia. In Friday, where we have an America which is fragmented into different countries and constant warfare and so on. And the way to get out of this dystopia is to leave. So the Heinlein solution for this is more elbow room. Is that your sense too?
Well, I was thinking about some of the characters who have moved to a valley where there's nobody there, and then whoop, we can see neighbors. People are moving in. Time to think about whether this is too crowded.
Yeah. I mean, Lazarus Long's dictum was if they require ID cards, it's time to move on. Yeah. So, yeah. Do it before they start implanting the ARFID. Yeah. So, and I guess that's one of the reasons, we'll talk about this on the Colonizing Space panel, but it's one of the reasons why I feel such a strong impulse that we need to get off the planet. It may just be because Papa Heinlein has programmed me that way. I think there's, that always seems to be where he ends up. Is there anything else that you guys want to add or talk about before we open things up? This is your first panel, right?
No, it's not my first.
Okay.
It's, I just feel like, and I'm sorry to report this, but read a lot of this a long time ago, and apparently I should have done slightly more reading before coming here, because you guys are...
Oh, I'm glad I'm not the only one who feels that way. Totally.
It's all good. Somebody in the audience will correct us. So, well, this is your first time at Convergence, though.
It's my first time here.
And it's my first time at Convergence. Is it? You've been here forever.
It's not my first time, but the last Heinlein panel I did was the very first panel I ever did in fandom.
Ah,
It was at the very first convention I'd ever been at.
which was?
I moderated the midnight panel on Heinlein and sex at a mini-con 30 years ago, and I distinctly remember telling the front row that they couldn't possibly actually be Heinlein heroes like they claimed, because if they were, they would be out there getting married and laid in that order.
All right then. We don't have any kids in the audience, do we? Okay, good.
I used euphemisms.
I'm very proud of you. Yeah, no, it's a Heinlein. It's funny. Heinlein through the ages, the reaction to just the word Heinlein now it seems is heightened. It means his name, his works, the reaction to his works means different things to different people at different generations. All right, we'll try to drag this back to where we were talking about. You had your hand raised, question, statement? What you got?
You're talking dystopias.
Yes.
And one of the things is, I mean, Time Enough for Love, which was the real, where Lazarus Long really got explored, came out in, what, 73? He was 64 by then. I think he'd already developed the realization that everything in life is temporary. No matter what you think is going on. You know, however great your situation is, it is going to change. However bad your situation, I mean, he was old enough to know that.
Well, you know, I think some of his earlier history, I mean, you know, he had always wanted to be in the Navy, officer in the Navy,
Yeah.
achieved that, went to Annapolis, and then got invalidated out with TB almost immediately.
But what I was going to focus on was Secundus, his perfect society. He
Right.
designed the perfect society. It was supposed to be free and open, and left for a couple hundred years. He came back, and it was this dystopian totalitarianism being run by this really nice guy, but it was still a dystopian totalitarianism.
Yes.
And so his answer was pack everybody up and move.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But
Right,
it's
but,
like
yeah, but it's sort of,
there is no perfect society. They all evolve into problems, and sometimes they fix themselves, and sometimes they don't.
yeah, and I think the message there is also you can design a utopia, but you know, let humans pick at it for a few hundred years, and it will turn into a dystopia. That the idea that you can perfect human societies is a false one.
It's practically a law of entropy, the way that any of the systems become dystopia.
Yeah. Sir.
There's this mention about him being, whether he was a libertarian or not, but he certainly wrote about it in his books.
Yeah.
In Glory Road, he ends the story by presenting what to the main character is probably a utopia society, but from the outside you look and basically it's a bunch of little armed camps that, you know, and people move between heavily armed to make sure they don't, you know, you don't get killed. And I'm thinking, this is a horrible society. It's a dystopia, but the main character is probably the, heaven on earth. It was exactly what they were looking for.
I remember being very disappointed by the end of Glory Road. but yeah, I mean, utopias are going to mean different things to different people. But it seems that Heinlein's dystopias, however he ended up describing them, all sort of come down to constraining human choice, constraining the individual's choice, which is a very libertarian idea. All right, I see dissent in the back. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I would call it individual choice, but the main character's choice.
The main character's choice.
Because there were plenty of women who gave up their choices regularly to the main character, to the main hero. There were plenty of women who said, I have choice, but I'm going to give it to you, regularly. And most of
Citing
Heinlein.
examples.
Like, most of his redheaded characters are like, I have all this
You
intelligence.
have to really narrow that down.
Yeah.
I have all this intelligence, but yes, you know best. Go for it.
I see so many counterexamples of that. If you take the Rolling Stones, You know, I mean, the head of that household is Dr. Stone, who is the mom. The one who is making the choices is Hazel Stone, who is the grandmother, who has this, earlier career, as we learned later in Movies of Harsh Mistress, as a political activist, right, and a revolutionary. And I see Star Beast, which is narrated by the boy, but is actually about the girl. The girl is the one who does, who is the motivator, the actor, the hero of the story.
I guess I'm thinking mostly of his later stuff, the Lazarus Long, etc., where, I always think of his stuff though as the only thing that matters is the free choice of the primary character. That's what really matters. Everything else, yes, great, all good. But the thing that really matters is the free choice of Lazarus Long or whoever it is. And whether he supports other people's choices is all independent of whether his choices are supported.
Interesting. I don't know, I mean, I see Lazarus has acted on a lot. I mean, especially, when his descendants knock him out and don't give him the choice, who force him to father more children and so on. It's a kind of rape, isn't it? So I think there's a lot maybe more nuance than. It's very hard to make blanket statements about freaking Heinlein. So,
Heinlein, complicated.
yeah, it really is, yeah.
It's just, politics of Heinlein to me are sort of all over the place.
Oh yeah.
And I guess the things that really come through is this idea, and you talked about it earlier, this idea that you don't solve problems, you just run away from them. And it's sort of like the manifest destiny approach of like American exceptionalism, like there's always going to be another planet to colonize where we don't have these horrible people to talk to or deal with or solve any problems or poverty or anything.
That's not exactly what I tried to say, but go ahead.
That's where I'm going now.
Yeah.
And I guess that to me is what's so tricky about Heinlein is there's like this element where it's like, whether or not you're even a person or an artificial person doesn't matter. Like race doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter. But you do have to be like really good looking and smart. And there's this like tension. It's like, total personal freedom for this awesome elite of billionaires and like the Howard families or like the main guy from I Will Fear No Evil, and it's like, it's very difficult for me, like, because I grew up like finding this very left-wing political message out of Heinlein because of those ideas of like your race doesn't matter, your gender doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then as I like got older and thought about politics, I'm like, he'll just kind of write off a whole planet because he thinks it's icky. And it's like, what about those people? And so that's a little tricky for me. I mean, to me, what I thought we were going to talk about when we talk about Heinlein dystopias is Starship Troopers. It's like, it's run by the veterans. Nobody else gets a vote.
That's a happy place. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. And,
Not for everyone.
And then it's like,
Not for the bugs, but
yeah, because, why would we care about alien races?
they're trying to kill us.
So it's like, and then that's one of the reasons why you will see stuff like, the movie popularization of Starship Troopers, where it's like, okay, let's just map fascism like directly onto this.
I don't think we can blame movies on
Well, and I guess
for the
here's the
writers.
thing. One of the reasons I still like Heinlein, even though I disagree with him politically, is that because I think there's a lot there, and so you'll get these moments, but you'll also get like you see this when you talked about spacing somebody, like his fascination with lifeboat ethics, like where he'll go on and on about like, well, of course you don't have a right to air, of course you don't have a right to water. Like, how are we, Tanstraffel? And it's like, maybe on a space station that's true, but here on Earth, like, at least in my politics, you do have a right to water. You do have a right to air.
Okay.
And so it's just, there's a lot going on there.
Okay. All right.
So just to bounce off that real quick, the last thing you mentioned, the lifeboat ethics, that's like the cold equations. And it's that sort of what calculation do we have to pull here in order to actually make this work out? So now how can we save anyone?
Yeah.
That's that's kind of the problem of going into space in general. I mean, that's just the setting, right? The trick is I think you mentioned this earlier of how some of the characters, when they get moved into risky, life-threatening situations. That's when they actually start reacting, being more heroic. But what was the one planet where they go back and then they sort of fall back to their old lives? It's a lot of what gets brought up over and over again is like this entropic idea of we have to fight against it to keep it from becoming a dystopia. Either that or leave.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, neat. Sir, you, then you?
So just tying, first of all, one thing tying into that is it seems like, yeah, there's this idea of freedom and the individual choice and stuff, but it's like I just read Anne Zaharsky's just recently, and it's true that there's sort of this enlightened group of people who are like running things and saying, well, everybody needs to have, we need to have freedom and everything, but they're very manipulative of the kind of rank and file people. And they're controlling the flow of information that these people get and the way that they react to things and stuff.
And you find this different from reality?
No, it's just like he's very much in favor of sort of this choice, but it's the
and
choice
it's portrayed in a very positive light, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe it is.
No. I mean, maybe take
That's
a look.
the impression I got.
I think there's a much more ambivalent sense to it. That
Yeah,
yes, this is the way things are, but not necessarily that this is a good thing.
I would say it's more of a, this is what we have to do in order to do it. I mean, in the sense that fighting the system, that idea of this is the right thing to do in this case, that's what makes it good, but it is a means to an end.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, he talks about sort of the getting behind the gears in Double Star. Was it Double Star, the one with the actor?
Yes.
It is Double Star, yeah. Which I think is actually one of his. It won the Hugo, but it's not really talked about nowadays, and it's worth looking at again. One of his better crafty things. All right, you then you.
So first to touch on what you were just saying there about the choices in controlling the general populace of his books, I find it a recurring theme throughout that he has his characters when they need to lie, cheat, and steal and do bad things, and they don't usually bat an eye. It's like, this is something I need to do. I'm going to do it. That's morally right to me because that's what I need to do, or whatever they want to go with for their personality. But that is a common theme with what they do for choices and how they treat other people. But one of the points I wanted to step back onto from a couple topics ago was the idea of constantly running away from the problems and dealing with it. And there was 2 books I wanted to bring up.
I don't think of it as running it away, by the way, but go ahead.
So 2 books I wanted to bring up was Farnham's Freehold,
right,
and then Door into Summer.
Okay.
Both of which he gives the protagonist basically a second chance to, this is how it turned out, I'm going to go back and try again and do better this time.
Okay.
And I found that different. He doesn't use that one all that often, but it's definitely a case where things went bad, and how do you deal with it when you have a little bit of wisdom to deal with what's going to happen in the future.
I mean, in Farnham's Freehold too, he's explicitly dealing with a first wife and a second wife too, where I hesitate to draw parallels to biography, but Heinlein did marry 3 times, and I think probably there is some of that one can learn.
There was some interest in the topic there.
Yes, I think so. All right, now you were making a comment privately, but
I was just going to, Starship Troopers, the movie.
Yes.
You can't really make a point about Heinlein from that movie. I mean, because they had to change so much. I don't think the fascism mapped well. Although there were things like, there's a scene in Basic where the sergeant breaks the troops' arm. In the book, this is an accident.
Yes, yeah.
This is an accident.
So,
I'm sorry, you were faster than I thought you would be. In the movie, if you recall, he's just statistically, he's just being the sadist and.
I think the general point that you were making was that the writer is to some extent responsible for reader response. But I think for when we get to general, from general to specific things, that we cannot blame the writer for what the movie turns out to be. So.
I guess I was most upset that he dropped out of things I like so much. That Johnny Pickett was specifically, he
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's.
Well, I mean, it is set in Argentina.
Yeah.
No, but it's.
Of course, it's all white actors.
No,
You can't have people go out.
he's.
Except Heinlein did.
It's in the southwestern United States, or what had been the southwestern United States.
So,
He's,
yeah,
Johnny Rico is Hispanic.
I have to admit, I was warned against
I
seeing the
know.
movie, and I haven't, and I'm not going to.
No.
So,
It's a great anti-fascist movie.
Other than making Ace, you know, it really works well.
Yeah, not so much. All right, let's see. We got you in the back, then you, then you, then you. You in the back.
You mentioned a lot about how characters make their own societies within Heinlein books, despite the dystopian environment they may live in. I always think that Heinlein does a really good job of, and part of what makes him politically ambiguous in a lot of ways, is that the characters operate within a dystopian system and may be creating their own system themselves to give themselves what they think is a freedom or space, but doesn't necessarily imply that the society they create is any less individual or more unique than the dystopian society they work in. I think, partially biased because it's the first story I read by him, but The Man Who Sold the Moon is my favorite example of that, because here's this guy who's relentlessly trying to do this one thing, and and kind of to touch on the points someone else made, that his ambition is so single-mindedly and true to himself that everything he does is okay because of that. But at the end of it, he's still trapped within a system created by other powers that he has theoretically throughout the whole story been becoming the supreme over, or beating the game as it was, but in the end is just still trapped by his own machinations, which I feel like a lot of his characters do. Like Starship Troopers, this character who's really heroic and wants to go into public service, and then even his dad, who disowned him, eventually does the same thing. But I think the novel makes a does a good job of leaving ambiguous of if these are really good methods or not. Like yeah, you're in these really harsh conditions to learn things and you'll become a great military officer, but maybe that's not a great thing. Like, it's ambiguous whether the characters actually have a freedom of individuality that they think they do. I feel like that's kind of what makes some of the libertarian elements to Heinlein's stories really weird, and still also not quite easily mappable onto a political spectrum.
And the fact that, Heinlein's work makes us think so deeply about these things is, I think, one of the reasons why Heinlein has lasted, because he does make us think about this. He's an extremely smooth writer, as you know from trying to read it and analyze it. It's very hard to do that because he's such a good storyteller. But afterwards, you think about it and you keep thinking about it, and it itches away at you, and you want to look at it again. And I think that's part of the success to his, the key to his longevity as a writer. So,
It's really good to argue about with yourself afterwards.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Something that maybe goes to address the concept of just leaving the general populace to fend for themselves is,
Yeah.
I think that was kind of an intentional thread, because there's always a personal thing about his characters, that they lift themselves up by their own bootstraps. And I'm thinking, and even when they maybe later go on to do something that you might think is very altruistic, and I'm forgetting the name of the book, but it was the character Thorby, Citizen of the Galaxy, exactly. Even when he decides he's going to use, when he becomes Thor Rudbeck, and he's going to use his billions of dollars to fight slavery, it is a personal thing. He is not trying to change society. He is just out to punish slavers. He wants to kill them all. So it's very personal. I think that kind of goes through all of his, that he doesn't really, he's not out to save everybody else, because they should be saving themselves.
That's what I was talking about.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I guess, kind of circling back to the movie again, the deal with the movie, at least what I took from it, is that he wasn't really trying to be true to the book at all. He was actually kind of being, making fun of it more.
Yeah.
I would say that's why he made such an overt, made it more overtly fascist as far as the Terran Federation and the look of things. And he was, I think the reason why he went with the actors he did and the look of them was he was kind of making fun of how, in the United States, at least in the media, we tend to glamorize kind of military adventurism, and so he had all these glamorous people in these roles. So you can't really analyze Heinlein from something that Paul Verhoeven is doing and having fun with.
Well, certainly not Heinlein's intent.
What was he doing in Showgirls?
I didn't figure
It's not the only explicit anti-Nazi movie that Verhoeven's made. And I mean, I guess the thing is, to me, the idea of a society that is run by veterans, that is explicitly putting militarism above anything else, like, I don't actually think you have to stretch it that far to get it into Nazi and fascist territory.
You don't have to be in the military to be a veteran.
And
It's
sorry,
any
to be
public service.
to be able to vote.
It's any public
yeah,
service
yeah,
to be a
any public
veteran.
service
It's not
like that.
military service.
It's
any public service.
I think what I got from Starship Troopers and from that was the notion of what makes a citizen, and the idea that this is something fluid and that can change and can be redefined. So Heinlein sets up this one way of the society that has one way to citizenship. But to me, as a young person reading Starship Troopers, and I guess I was probably still a teenager when I read it for the first time, the notion that this was could potentially be changeable was earth-shaking for me. So, yeah, you and then you, yeah.
So one thing I remember from Starship Troopers that they actually talk about when he's in the classes when he's in high school is they specifically mention that they've tried different types of governments, and that this current form, they've tried the scientists running things dispassionately, logically. They've tried the, heartthrob people doing it emotionally. None of that worked. This is simply the latest iteration that they're trying as far as government went. And so their premise behind it, they said in the book, was that the entire purpose of service to become a citizen is that the people serving are willing to put their own body at risk, to become a citizen and have a say in what's going on, and that the people who do not feel that they're willing to risk their lives or their bodies, should not have the same say as somebody who will.
Yeah, it's a whole notion of skin in the game, right? In this case, literal skin. Let's see, who hasn't spoken yet?
One comment on that.
All right, Green, then you in the back, yeah.
Just the important thing to remember in that particular system is the veterans voted, not the soldiers. You didn't have a vote
You
until
couldn't vote
after
when
you
you
were
were a
out of the
soldier,
military.
yeah. It's a fascinating system. And as I said, for me, what was interesting about it was not so much that he was persuasive that this was the way that things should be, but just the notion that we should be thinking about it.
In other words, it was a thought experiment, not an instruction manual?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why it sparked so many responses. And I've said before, too, one of the things I like about science fiction is that it is a long intellectual discussion, a lot of back and forth. So there have been a lot of answers to Starship Troopers. Certainly the Forever War was the first obvious, novel-length answer to that by Haldeman. But there have been many, many others. And there's just, tons of back and forth and give and take and playing with the ideas that you can do with science fiction when it's displaced. When it's, all right, we're not talking about here and now, we're not talking about our soldiers, we're not talking about the Vietnam War, we're talking about there. And then we can talk about it in a way that's more open and less emotional, but still can be as visceral as it needs to be. Yeah, does that
Sort
make
of
sense?
a constructive alienation, as it were?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's nice. I'm gonna steal that. Yeah. All right, red shirt, then person with glasses. You're the red shirt.
I wanted to take off of the citizenship thing, because he also brought it up in Beyond This Horizon, where unless you have that skin in the game, you're gonna have different rights.
Right.
Versus the people who do have, this sense, without thinking too hard as a teenager, when I was reading through a lot of this stuff, it's like, well, yeah, he came out of World War II era. Of course, everybody's going to serve. You want to serve. None of this draft stuff. Everybody wants to be in the military, and there was always that respect for it, and it was no surprise to me to find out what his history was after my reading.
Right.
I kind of took very little information before I found out what his biography was. So it was like a lot of reading and then realizing, yeah, of course he has all of his background, because it makes sense with what he's been writing,
Yeah,
the context.
And Starship Troopers was 20 years after Beyond This Horizon, so yeah, very, very different attitudes. And he picked
But similar
up
at the
on-
same time.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, same person, but different time, and,
Yeah.
and writing in a different time for a different time. So, Glasses?
One bit of trivia that people may know here, there is only one piece of fiction in the Marine Corps bookstore. Starship Trooper.
What, not Hunter Harrington? I'm offended.
That's Navy.
That's Navy, that's true. Yeah, and I think that's for a very good reason, because of the kinds of, pushing you into different modes of thinking that you might not feel comfortable with if you were just getting a textbook on different kinds of government and different ways of forming government and the notion of citizenship. I mean, Heinlein, puts it into a very polemic novel that allows you to engage these ideas. So, yeah.
I have an actual question, which is...
We will answer questions. Yeah.
So one of the things that I see a lot in Heinlein is you have sort of this philosopher guy, usually a male, who has sort of figured things out, is sort of more enlightened than the people around him, and somehow works to improve society or whatever his goals are. And it seems like in his mind, Heinlein's mind, that this enlightenment kind of goes along with sort of a moral superiority. I'm wondering if there's any examples that you can think of in his works where there's a bad guy. One of the bad guys who under either the main character or some other character in the book who is an evil person who nevertheless has the same sort of enlightenment, understands what's going on, but uses it for his own selfish ends.
I always thought Farnham's Revolt was kind of like that.
I think it's just chock full. Pretty much any of the ruling class in any of a Heinlein novel is going to be somebody with power, somebody who is intelligent.
But do they understand? Do they have that same kind of enlightenment that like the main character has, where he sees things, he kind of sees this society for the way it is, and kind of the underlying principles of society, these kind of platonic ideals and stuff. Do they have that, or are they just kind of at a higher level, in the society and kind of going along with that as the intelligentsia?
Guy, do you want to field that?
I keep wanting to ask whether you're making an equivalence between enlightened and successful.
Right,
Because
okay.
that's kind of palming, I don't think you're doing it,
No,
but I think it's kind of palming a card in the argument too.
Okay.
And I gotta think about that more.
Right. No, I'm thinking.
You're talking about like the wise old man, like the guy who runs the spy shop at Friday's Inn,
Yeah.
or like
yeah.
the doctor
Right,
and Nina's a harsh mistress, or it's like this. It's like
Right,
it's like the
professor.
cathecting of Heinlein himself, just like many of the mature, redheaded, ultra intelligent, knows a billion languages. They're all Ginny, and so it's like they're kind of.
Yeah,
like
this
that.
sort of all-knowing character who has dispenses.
Like the evil Jubal Harshaw is what you're talking about. Yeah. I think yes. I think there were that these were who the good guys are really fighting against. The people who have the intelligence and who have the competence and who see the system for what it is and who choose to use it for goals that are not congruent with our heroes' goals. They're just not the main characters, so we don't remember them so much.
Not all of them get
or are they
speeches.
the main characters? In some cases?
Well, I think
yes.
I think
but
yes.
we empathize with them, so they don't seem like they're bad guys. That's the other thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think the guy from Friday is certainly one of those.
Well, I was going to ask if you could name a strong villain in any of his books, because he seems more against society in general.
Right.
There's no specific person.
I was about to make that point. Thank you for making it for me.
It's kind of similar to the way that Ayn Rand sets up villains in her books of like, well, they're just craven second raters, they're just trying to, they're selfish but in the wrong way, and they're not smart enough to be cool.
I think Heinlein's bad guys, certainly he has dumb bad guys too, but he also has smart bad guys. Otherwise, there's no challenge for the good guys. opinions. But no, he
You don't
doesn't
necessarily meet them.
And he does not want you to identify with them. I think you're absolutely right that he never ever wants you to find them sympathetic and have the reader project themselves onto them. I don't think that's a bad thing. You haven't spoken yet, so you next, and then you will share, and then we gotta go.
I actually have a question. I'm just kind of wondering if anybody can think of whether he ever actually wrote a sort of disabled hero. Because all of his heroes are kind of this Superman.
I mean, the Man Who Sold the Moon absolutely was. I mean, one of the reasons why you're trying to sell the moon, because you get up there.
Cat Who Walked Through Walls, I mean, the main character had a trichiny. It's pointed out
He was
multiple
missing a
times.
leg. Yeah, and there's the guy in Friday, he had a cane and he had a bum leg, and I think the doctor.
Riesling, the blind poet of the spaceways. So
I don't necessarily mean physical.
Waldo, yeah.
Oh, Moon is the Harsh
Manny
Mistress,
is,
main character.
Man Who Sold the Moon.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah,
So yes,
Yeah.
plenty of physical
Not exactly the same.
handicaps to be
Yeah.
overcome. The Man Who Was Too Lazy to Fail. There's a character failing.
What about mental?
Mental? No, I don't think so. I don't think that was interesting to him. I don't think he saw the story potential there. Okay, not everybody is going to. Blue shirt,
Yeah,
and then I
I
think
just-
final statements.
I just
Yeah.
want to make a comment about someone else's comment about Citizen of the Galaxy.
Okay.
That Thorby really wasn't doing all this anti-slavery stuff by himself, because
Right.
Colonel Baslam, his foster father, basically was a member of the X-Corps or whatever the name of that organization was, and he actually, at the end of the book, became a member of that organization in secret, and that he was ordered by them to basically, stay that way, because the company Rudbeck was riddled with people who were enabling the slavery, and so really, and by the way, Colonel Baslam was handicapped because he lost a leg and stuff like that, and he's one eye. But anyway, so the thing is, he was really always under the tutelage or orders of other people, almost throughout the entire book.
So we actually do have an example of a Heinlein good guy using a system to fight a systemic bad thing. Yeah. Okay. All right, panelists. Any last statements? Anything you want to? Anything you've learned at this panel?
I learned that I need to go read a whole lot more. I'm very happy to hear all the stories that you guys have about them.
My head is now full of ideas. It's going to take me another few weeks to sort out, and I'm very grateful for them.
Yeah. Me too. I always get more from a Heinlein panel, I feel like, than I put in, and it's the Heinlein effect. It makes you think. And well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Great.